Hi everyone, I'm Jeannie Nielsen. On Facebook and YouTube you can find me as Jeannie Nielsen the Card Lady. And today I want to show you a fabulous suite from the annual catalog from Stampin' Up. I'm introducing these suites in conjunction with my upline Marilyn San Clemente and my sideline Kathy Bedell. And my favorite suite in the catalog is the You're a Peach suite on page 60 and 61. This fabulous suite has a lovely designer paper. I love the colors, and I tend to be a fall person. I tend to dress in peaches and yellows, so this immediately drew me to the suite. I love the adorable jelly jars. The suite has a great stamp set with some fabulous sentiments, has a large peach with a stem. It has some smaller peaches and flowers. It has this great green stem, and I'll show you in a minute that you can interchange either the stamped flowers or peaches in this stem. Matching the stamps are these great dies which cut out all of your stamped images, and it even has a die that will cut out your long narrow sentiments, and I really like this. I put mine on a magnetic sheet and put it right in my stamp case. Then I make a copy and I put that on the back of that so that if I can't figure out where a die goes, I can immediately look at this. That's my little tip for you for today. On this page, you can see the colors that Stampin' Up! Recommends with this paper. Don't let yourself be limited to this. In this paper, you're going to see that I think that you can also use garden green and maybe even so saffron. I made a couple of samplers to show you these. First of all, we have this sampler. It shows you all of the 12 designs in the package, 6 double-sided sheets, 12 by 12. These are the colors. I used a new punch just to show you the different colors very quickly. Then I also put together the sampler so that you could see how I use this. You've got this die that cuts out the stem with these leaves. How adorable, these little flowers. These flowers could also be used for the centers of your bigger flowers here, but I didn't use it that way. You've got your bumblebee here. Have a peachy day. Happy birthday. What a fabulous sentiment that is. Sweet as a peach. And look at this. This is what I was talking about. You've got your stem with your flowers, and you've got your stem with your peaches. You've got your large peach with your stem, and you've got some other sentiments here. Now, although I've used many different dies in here just to show you the versatility, this is the die that cuts out the sentiments, and there are lots of little sentiments, so they go really well together. I'm going to have this in my room close to the suite, so if anybody wants some ideas of how to use the stamps and the dies, they can get it from this. What I'm going to start by doing is stamping my peach. I'm going to open both the Pale Papaya and the Calypso Coral. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I decided that the best way to stamp this is to shade it. So what I'm going to do is start by stamping my peach in the Pale Papaya. And I have a dedicated sponge dauber that I can ink up with my Calypso Coral. And I'm just going to add that around the edges just a tiny bit, not much, just a tiny bit, just to add a little bit of shading. And then I'm going to stamp that on my paper here. This is basic white cardstock. And look at that. Almost looks like a real plum, doesn't it? Then the other thing I wanted to show you is the stem. I'm going to start by putting my stamp on the block, and because it's photopolymer, I can see where I'm stamping. I'm inking up with the garden green, and then I'm going to take my early espresso, and I'm just going to put the stem there, and maybe a little bit of the top of the leaves. And I'm going to stamp this twice. So I'm going to do that twice. I'm going to do it a second time. Garden green on the leaves. Flip it, and then you can see right through here where you're going to ink up with your early espresso. A tip that I forgot to show you when I stamp a large solid image, and I'll use it here, is I take my stamp and I add it to the paper, and then because it's sticky, I lift up my paper and I just kind of rub my finger over the bottom, and that just makes sure that I completely fill the image. And I especially do that with my larger solid images. So I should have done that with the peach just to show you that that's something that I do all the time. Okay, so what we're going to do next is make a card. So I've got my mini Stampin' Boss. If I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to move, I could use a Post-it note to hold that in place, but I think it's going to be okay. I'm going to do that with my leaves as well. Put this on, and I'm going to run this through and cut this out. I'm going to run this through again so I can cut out my second stem. Cuts out so beautifully, so easily. Let's cut out one more stem, and then we'll put this card together. If you don't have this little Stampin' Boss, I should tell you it's really, really handy, especially when you're traveling. If you have narrow or small dies or images to cut out, it's not going to cut out your larger full-size cards, but it's lightweight, doesn't take up a lot of room, easy to pack, and so much fun to use. When I'm done with my dies, I either put them back on my magnetic sheet, or I also have this little tool. This is from Harbor Freights. I got it from the automotive department. I think mechanics use it to hold their screws, etc. And this, for me, is really easy to throw my dies in so they don't get lost. I am going to start by putting some ribbon around here. I'm going to, for something different, use this new papaya ribbon. What I'm going to do is wrap it around the card, to the back of the card. And what I do is I either use Scotch tape, or what I really prefer is some washi tape because it's acid free and it won't hurt the card. I'm going to add this, just a strip of this to hold my ribbon in place. There we go. One more piece for the bottom. You can even add a glue dot under there if you want to. What I'm going to do next is use some scraps. These are 1/2-inch strips of paper. I tend to keep my 1/2-inch strips. The designer paper, this makes a really nice card. This is 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. When I have my Whisper White strips, when I cut the inserts for my cards, they're 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and that leaves me a 1/2-inch by 11-inch strip. And I keep those, and I find it very handy to stamp my sentiments on there. This is one of the designer papers, and I'm just going to add a little bit of glue. I'm a big glue fan, more than snail or seal. I've always been a glue person. I am going to add a little bit under here, just so it doesn't slide around. And I'm a big fan of polka dots, so we're going to use the polka dot pattern as well. And we're going to butt it right up to each other at the top of the paper and side by side. And the other thing I want to do is use the early espresso to stamp my sentiment. I have the happy birthday sentiment, but I'm inking it up with the early espresso. I've decided that's going to be the most showy. Right there. Beautiful. And what I should do first is add my peach. I have some dimensionals here. I use every little piece of the dimensional. I'm going to take my peach and one of my stems, and I'm going to put that behind here, and I'm going to hold that in place just like that. And then I'm going to add it to the front of my card here, just like that. And I've got my other stem, and what I'm going to do is put that there. Isn't that beautiful? And see what I mean when I say that I think that this garden green works really well with this ribbon. They say pear pizzazz, but I even think you could use old olive if you wanted to. I have my garden green paper. This is 3/16 of an inch larger on the top and side. I like that measurement a little bit better. 1/8 of an inch just isn't enough, and 1/4 of an inch seems to be too much, so that's the measurement I usually tend to go to. And then I have my Pale Papaya card base. This is one of our new colors. Just love this. And we're going to crease that really well with our bone folder and attach this. You don't need a lot of glue to get it to stick, especially if you want to move it. You're going to find that a little bit of glue goes a long way. So there we have that. Beautiful. I think this is nice and bright with that ribbon. I'll show you 2 other cards I made using this stamp set. Oh, this is the one I made before, and this is what I said I used the sheer ribbon. I really like this ribbon too, though. I think that's very showy, maybe even more so. I also made this card, and this is showing the blue designer paper. This is the back of this pattern. So I just cut a 4 by 5 1/4 inch, actually 3 3/4 inch by 5 inch piece in half, and then put the strip of the ribbon across it again. And this is my 3rd card. I love this card even more. I love the stripes nowadays. I love polka dots and stripes. Patterns are very trendy. This is what I'm showing you with stems, and I used the flowers here. You'll see that here I used the stem and I used the peaches. I wanted to show you that very quickly. When you stamp this, and I've got my garden green, another scrap of basic white ready to go here. I'm going to put that right here and stamp. Beautiful. And then I was telling you that you can use either the flowers or you could use peaches. But I did want to show you, if you were going to do that, you'd have to do that right on the card and you couldn't cut that out. The die that comes with it cuts out the stems, or it cuts out the peaches, or it cuts out the flowers. So you'll have to make up your mind if you want it stamped on there or if you wanted to cut out the individual pieces. The die here, I should tell you, when it cuts out your peaches, although it's one die, which makes it very handy for cutting out, it will give you 3 individual peaches. The other thing that I do with this, I'm going to stamp this with the Pale Papaya. And again, I'm going to use my Calypso Coral and my dedicated sponge dauber. I'm going to keep this close by to my stamp set, and you can just add a little bit to the edges. You don't even have to re-ink, just a little bit to the edges of the flowers, maybe even to the centers if you wanted. And that gives some nice shading. Now let's stamp this. I'm going to show you how easy it is to line this up. Let me just close my ink pads because I tend to get it all over my fingers, all over my paper, especially my newly stamped card, all over my clothes, you name it. It goes like this. Stamp it like that. If you're not sure how it lines up, don't worry about it. It's easy enough to just cut out the individual flowers and you could put them right over top. But I really like how pretty that is. So it isn't perfectly lined up. You can experiment so that it lines up how you like it. I would probably cut these out and then bump them up with dimensionals. So these are 3 of the cards that we'll be making in the card class that I have. And they will probably include a package of the designer paper, probably a sponge dauber, and this beautiful Pale Papaya ribbon. You can add some opal dots if you wanted to, or you could add some pearls. There's even something called genie gems, and they're kind of yellow and green, and they might match really nicely with this too. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and And showing you this beautiful, beautiful sweet, my little jam jar ready to go. This will be a great favor for my friends. And I even have guests coming the end of June, and I could give that to them in a nice welcome basket. So all kinds of ideas of ways to use this sweet. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you purchase it and have so much fun with it. Thanks for joining me.